Wonderful. So in the last video, we thought about what firms with market power do, right? How firms with market power maximize their profits, how things like the elasticity of demand for their product affect their optimal decisions. In this video, I want us to think about the effects of those decisions for economic efficiency, and then think a little bit about how we might want to respond to market power, how government might react to monopolistic firms or firms with market power. So to start with, let's ask the question of whether the optimal output of a firm with market power is economically efficient, right? So we said before with our MOPSOX firm, right, that given a demand of Q equals 100 minus 1/2 P, right, or P of Q is 200 minus 2Q, and a cost function of 1/2 Q squared, we're going to end up with an optimal output of 40 pairs of MOPSOX. Now, as we've talked about a lot, right, this is going to be fewer MOPSOX than we would have produced if we produced where price equals marginal cost, right? If we'd said price equals marginal cost, we would have produced until 200 minus 2Q equals Q, right? Or until Q equals 200 thirds, which is about 66.67, right? And we know from all of our work in the last unit that price equals marginal cost leads to economic efficiency. So how can we understand that on this graph? Well, essentially the way we can think about this is, when we're producing where price equals marginal cost, right, we're producing at the Pareto efficient level, because if the firm made another unit, the value of their inputs, right, the value of the labor and capital they're using to make MOPSOX, would be greater than the value of the MOPSOX to the consumer, right? When the firm stops producing when they have market power, that's not the case, right? If they produced an extra unit, the consumer would value that extra unit much more highly than the market values the inputs used to produce that unit, right? The labor and capital used to produce that unit. The only reason that the producer isn't making that extra unit is because if they did, they'd have to lower the price for everyone else, right? They'd be very happy to make a side deal to sell a 41st and a 42nd and a 43rd MOPSOX, right, to the individuals willing to pay for those up until they produce 66.67 MOPSOX, right? They're just not willing to lower the price in order to get those extra customers. Another way to think about this is to think about our producer and consumer surplus, right? Both if we produced where price equals marginal cost and where the firm is actually going to produce. So if we produce where price equals marginal cost, right, we produce right here. Consumer surplus is going to be the difference between the price consumers would pay for each unit and the price they actually have to pay, right? So consumer surplus would be this whole area here. And producer surplus would be the difference between the price at which the producer would be willing to accept, right, their marginal cost, and the amount that they actually sell the unit for, right? So producer surplus would be all this right here. For now, we're going to pretend that fixed costs aren't something to worry about, right? What happens when the firm instead decides to produce 40 units of MOPSOX is two things. So the first thing is that while they give up a little bit of producer surplus here, right, they're going to gain this whole rectangle of producer surplus here, right? So instead of selling their units at a price of 200 minus 2 times 66, right, so a price of 66.67, right, they're going to sell their output at a price of 120, gain this rectangle of profit while giving up this little triangle of profit. The other thing that happens is that this triangle of profit here goes away, and this triangle of consumer surplus here goes away, right? So this is going to become what we call a deadweight loss. meaning that this triangle is lost to consumers, this triangle is lost to producers, and it doesn't go to anyone, right? Nobody benefits at all from the loss of this surplus, because that represents the surplus that would have been gained from the production of units that were never produced, right? Units 40 through 66.7. So one way to think about what firms with market power are doing is they're imposing a cost on everyone, right? They're imposing a loss to society, this triangle of deadweight loss, in order to appropriate for themselves this extra rectangle of profit from their consumers, right? So they're reducing the overall benefit to society of the mop sock industry. They're also extracting some of the surplus from consumers and reappropriating it to themselves. So we might think of this as having clear economic efficiency implications, right? We're going to produce less output than we would if we were output efficient, if we were producing a Pareto efficient amount of output. It's also going to have equity effects, right? Because we are transferring resources, right? We're transferring benefits from economic activity from consumers to producers. Which is something that, if we think more broadly about equity, if this is the De Beers Diamond Corporation, we're going to think of that as increasing inequality. If we're thinking about this as kumquat coffee, it's a little bit less clear. So the big picture takeaway here is pretty clear, right? The big picture takeaway is that monopolies are bad, market power is bad, it leads to inefficiently low levels of output, and it reduces consumer surplus. So we should expect, generally speaking, that governments should do whatever they can in pretty much any situation to destroy market power, right? To force firms to face as much competition as possible, to do what they can to break up monopolies, to do what they can to make sure that no firm has the ability to set market prices. So let's take this from this silly mop socks example to something a little bit more realistic and concrete. I recently learned about a pretty terrifying example of market power, monopoly. I don't know if you guys know it's a popular song on TikTok called Brand New Lamborghini by DaBaby. Well, it turns out, I don't know if you knew this, it turns out that if a radio station wants to play DaBaby's Brand New Lamborghini, or YouTube wants to host it, they have to pay DaBaby a price to do so. He's a monopoly supplier of the Brand New Lamborghini song. And as a result, what we'd expect is, and I believe that this is true, he's going to be charging a price to play his song above his marginal cost, right? He's going to be charging a monopolistic market power price, earning himself a markup. And what that means is that we're output inefficient, right? None of us are hearing that song as often as we should in a competitive market. So it seems pretty clear, right, that the government should support any sort of competition that would stop this from happening, right? If I went and, let's say, downloaded the song off of YouTube and then uploaded it on my own website and offered that radio stations could play my version of the song for free or for a very, very low price for my marginal cost, right? I should get a lot of government support for doing that, right? Maybe I could get a little subsidy to encourage competition, or at least a letter of congratulations from from the Federal Communications Commission. But as you're probably imagining, if I did this in real life, I would probably get a different reaction, right? Probably something like at least a cease and desist letter, probably a lawsuit, maybe if I kept it up, some sort of incarceration and anti-piracy laws, right? It would not be encouraged by the government. And this isn't just a DaBaby problem, right? In many, many circumstances, the reason that firms have market power, the reason that firms are able to charge a price above marginal cost, is because the government is giving firms permission to exclude their competitors, right? The government is protecting firms from competition. This is true of everything with a trademark. This is true of everything with a patent. The reason that you can't sell your own version of Apple computers with the little Apple on them is A, probably technical skill, but B, you would get sued by Apple. The reason that you can't make handbags with L's and V's all over them and charge marginal cost, right? You'd get sued by Louis Vuitton and you'd win. The government would protect their patent and their copyright. So why does that make sense to do? Why would the government want to encourage monopolies when we just talked about how inefficient and bad they are? So to think about this, let's imagine that in addition to paying this cost per unit, right, this cost function we wrote down 1/2 c squared, or q squared, in order to invent the mop sock, you had to spend hours of time laboriously stitching together different materials, trying to figure out a combination of mop and sock that's both comfortable and practical, right? And let's say that that cost you $3,000. Right? So if you get your patent, right, you're protected from competition and are able to charge a profit maximizing price, is it going to be worth it to develop the mop sock? Well, to do that, right, we just need to calculate our profit, which we can either do by just calculating the area of this trapezoid here, or equivalently by taking total revenue minus total cost. So I'll do the total revenue minus total cost, right? Profit is going to be P times Q minus C of Q, right? So our profit is going to be 120 times 40 minus 1/2 times 40 squared, right? Which is of course going to be 120 minus 20 times 40, or in other words, is going to be $4,000. So I'd have to pay $3,000, but I'd make $4,000. So yeah, absolutely, it's worth it, right? Once you have the idea for the mop sock, you should spend all that time and energy trying as hard as you can to produce a good product. Great. Now let's say it costs $3,000 to come up with the mop sock as an idea, but it only costs $100 to knock it off once it exists, right? Once you can see how a mop sock is produced, once you know the materials, setting up your mop sock making factory is really pretty straightforward. So our cost for a competitor, right, would just be C of Q is 1/2 Q squared plus 100, right? So we'd say our marginal cost is Q, right? Our average total cost is going to be 1/2 Q plus 100 over Q, right? So our optimal output is going to be where marginal cost equals average total cost, right? Q equals 1/2 Q plus 100 over Q. Q is going to equal 200 to the 1/2, right? Which is going to be about $12. Right? So if you have competitors, your competitors are going to be able to offer the mop sock at a price of $12. Oh, I'm sorry, what am I doing? We're going to have about 12 socks produced. And then the price is going to be equal to marginal cost, which is just going to be Q. So the price is going to be about $12. Sorry, I forgot that step. Right, so if you have competitors, they're going to be able to offer the mop sock at $12. They're going to drive down profits to zero. There's going to be no incentive to come up with the mop sock to begin with. So in a world where we don't enforce this monopoly, when there's cost for developing a product, instead of getting this full producer and consumer surplus, right, this full social benefit for mop socks, we would end up getting no social benefit for mop socks at all. So as a result, we can think about monopolies or market power as a very imperfect way of incentivizing research and development or product development in circumstances where alternatives don't exist. Why do I say it's an imperfect way? Because even once you've developed this mop sock, right, you're getting this trapezoid of profit here, you're not getting the full benefit to society, the full potential benefit to society of your idea, right? You're missing out on both the triangle of consumer surplus up here and the triangle of deadweight loss here. So this is a way of giving a partial incomplete incentive for the development of a new idea, right? The mop sock could have a total social benefit greater than its development costs and still not be worthwhile to produce, right? Let's say that the development costs were $4,500.